I'd like to call to order today's regularly scheduled Board of Adjustment meeting. My name is David Alzamora. I'm your chair. To my left, I have Jeremy Hooper. To my right, I have Jack Farrell. We do have some absences tonight. Julia Latham is, Philip Shoemaker is unable to make it, and Julia Latham is absent as well. Philip is actually no longer at the board. He did not renew his seat, so we'll be seating a permanent member in the future. But if in order to have a full board for tonight's meeting, does anyone have a motion to seat any members for tonight?
I move to seat Paul Roberts and Matt Jones as voting members of the Board of Adjustment for the regular meeting of December 2nd, 2022, December 1st, 2022, excuse me.
We have a motion from Jack Farrell to seat Paul and Matt. Do we have a second?
Second.
Do we have all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And I don't believe there are going to be any opposed in this case, so Matt and Paul, come on up. Contestants on The Price is Right. So we are going to stick to the agenda for this afternoon's meeting. First thing on the agenda was calling everything to order. Second thing we have is the approval of minutes from our July 7th, 2022 regular meeting. Does anybody have any comments on those minutes? If you have any comments, feel free to make those. If not, I'll accept a motion to approve those minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as written from July 7th, 2022 Board of Adjustment meeting.
We have a motion from Jeremy to approve the minutes as written.
Second.
We have a second by Jack Farrell. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none opposed, the minutes from the July 7th, 2022 regular meeting are approved. Before we enter into this afternoon's this afternoon's public hearing, just from the board, I know you've had a chance to review everything that's coming before us, but just to make sure there aren't any conflicts, if there are any board members, well, let me find my paper here. If there are any board members who feel like they need to disclose any sort of interest in this hearing, if anybody has a fixed opinion that they will not be changing, if you've had any ex parte communications with this party, if you have a close familial, business, or other relationship with these people, or any sort of financial interest in the outcome of this matter, please disclose it at this time, and we'll make it a decision whether you need to recuse yourself or not. Does anyone have anything that they would like to address?
Now, the only thing I would mention is I did visit these facilities, these parcels yesterday. I did not speak to anyone, nor did I see anyone actually in the parcels.
I also visited both sites today, and I did see I believe the property owner or someone at 25 Aaron and Mink, and did not have any discussions that would prohibit me from participating today.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you brought it up for Aronimink, and we can address it when we get to that one, but we'll start with Shinnecossett. I will say, hearing the applicant in this case being Gano Construction on behalf of the property owners, I work at Van Camp Meacham and Newman. We do have a relationship with Gano Construction. I personally do not have any interest in this case. I don't know the property owners personally. I'm not even sure that I could tell you who's going to stand up here and speak on Gano's behalf. So, but I did want to bring that up. Our law firm does have a working relationship with Gano Construction. I do not see that being an issue in my decision making this afternoon. And again, yeah, I don't stand to gain one way or another from the results of tonight's hearing. Does anyone have any issues with me remaining on?
I I just have a question, and they pay you, they pay your law firm, correct?
Yep, they do.
Any discussion on that as a board or anything? Any concerns?
I've not spoken to them about this case, have not spoken to the property owners. Yeah, I saw that on the agenda and just wanted to address it for full disclosure.
No concerns? All right, so I'll also point out, just in my past career, none today, that I have also had familiarity with Gannett Construction. Currently, in my new career, in my new job, there is none, so.
Perfect. Well, hearing no objections, I think we can move forward into the public hearing. I'd like to make a motion to recess the regular meeting and enter into this afternoon's first public hearing. Do I have a motion? Or I guess I'll make a motion. Do I have a second?
Second?
Anyone opposed to enter this afternoon's first public hearing? Hearing none, or I guess all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Now that we've heard no opposition, we can go ahead and enter this afternoon's public hearing. Our staff member that will be presenting this afternoon is Alfred Cassidy. Alfred, would you mind standing up? Would just like to swear you in. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing untruthful during your statements this afternoon?
I do, Mr. Chairman.
Wonderful. Well, if you would like to proceed, you can go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The purpose of the public hearing is to receive testimony for a variance request from Section 9.13 fences, walls, and columns, F, retaining walls, table of dimension requirements, 9.2A, for the property addressed as 11 Shinnecosta Lane, further identified by Moore County tax ID number as 00.
Mr. Cassidy, you may wish to either turn on your microphone or speak closer to it. I believe many in the audience are having difficulty with that.
It's on, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
if you
you.
could just speak a little bit closer
Okay.
into it.
As I was stating, requirements for the property address as 11 Shinnecosta Lane, further identified by Moore County, tax ID number as 000-14624. This property is located within the R10 High Density Residential Zoning District. Specifically, the applicant, Gonroom Construction, on behalf of the owners, is requesting a variance to allow for a retaining wall in the golf course setbacks. Evident hearing process. Requests for variance are quasi-judicial decisions which require an evidentiary hearing. These decisions are quasi-judicial due to the fact judgment and discretion is used in applying the standards for review. The purpose of evidentiary hearing is to gather competent, relevant, and factual evidence on the application, not solicit board public opinion. All who participate must be sworn in to provide factual testimony and relevance evidence only, and limit repetition testimony. Staff acts as the initial witness by presenting basic information and background on the request and enter staff exhibits into the record. The applicant and other witnesses will be sworn in and are able to provide factual testimony on the application to the board. Board members listen, ask relevant questions, assess the credibility of all testimony, remain impartial, and vote on the case. At the conclusion of the hearing, the board shall make its decision based on the evidence submitted and testimony given while adopting findings of fact on all standards. The public hearing was noticed in accordance with the Pinehurst Development Ordinance and the North Carolina General Statutes 160D-406. This is the public notification area map. All the properties highlighted in red received notification regarding the variance request. This request is before the Board of Adjustment because the applicant requests various section 9.3F of the Pinehurst Development Ordinance, which does not allow retaining walls over 36 inches to encroach into the rear and side setbacks for accessory structures. The property is located within the R10 High Density Residential Zoning District, and the rear yard abuts Pinehurst Resort Course Number 6, which is Zone Recreational Development District. The accessory structure setbacks from the golf course in the R10 zoning district is 30 feet and 10 feet from the side and the rear on non-golf course setbacks. The subject lot number 3 was created as part of the Pine Hill subdivision in September of 1984 by Beach and Brown Incorporated. The property is approximately 13,184 square feet in total area, which is more than the minimum 10,000 square foot lot size of the R10 zoning district. Property was purchased by the current owners in June of 2015 based on the records from the Moore County Tax Department and Register of Deeds. The surrounding lots, which were also created as part of the original subdivision, border golf course property and include single-family homes all built from the 1990s to present. In July of this year, planning and inspection staff issued a permit for a new single-family home on the vacant lot for the applicant, Gonru Construction. The approved site plan was included in the agenda packet, material labeled Exhibit A-3.1. A retaining wall was not a part of the approved application for development, but was discovered after staff performed an inspection of the property. After obtaining a survey, it was determined that the retaining wall was constructed out of compliance with the applicable setback regulations. The finished wall height varies from 20 to 40 inches as depicted on the final as-built survey labeled Exhibit A-3.2. Prior to construction, the vacant lot had approximately 14 feet of elevation change, increasing the height from the front to the rear golf course. After grading for development of the site, there was still approximately 4 feet of elevation difference at the rear of the lot. During construction, there were periods of drainage and erosion issues due to this elevation difference. The applicant has indicated that, and staff can concur, that the construction of the wall has helped alleviate these issues of runoff post-construction. This is an area view with 2-foot contours, which displays the property seeking a variance in red. And, contour line kind of deals with the photography. This is the original subdivision plat from 1984 showing the location of the property. As you can see from the left to right, the illustration to the left is the approved site plan that was submitted to staff. The illustration to the right is displaying the property, which identifies the location of the retaining wall in red. As you can see, the retaining wall is kind of L-shaped. And if you look at the retaining wall heights, I'm not sure if you could be able to see it. You have A, B, C, D, and E. And it tells you the different height difference, like A, 20, B, 40, C, 38, D, 39, and E, 27. And these are current photos of the retaining wall from different angles. And as you can see from the picture, the photos, it's like an L shape. Standards of review. The Board of Adjustment shall not grant a variance unless and until it makes the following findings: unnecessary hardship will result from the strict application of the ordinance. The hardship results from conditions that are particular to the property, such as location, size, or photography. The hardship did not result from actions taken by the applicant or the property owner. The requested variance is consistent with the spirit, purpose, and intent of the ordinance. Action by the Board of Adjustments. After conducting a public hearing, the Zoning Board of Adjustments may have the authority to subpoena witnesses and may request additional information, continue the public hearing on the requested variance, grant the requested variance, grant the requested variance with conditions. In granting any variance, the Board of Adjustments may attach appropriate conditions provided that the conditions are reasonably related to the request. Deny the requested variance. Any decision granted or denied, the request shall be accompanied by findings of facts stating the reasons why the request meets or does not meet each of the standards of review. Granting of any variance request requires a concurring vote of 4 to 5. At this time, staff would like to submit the following into the record: staff report with attachments and exhibits, presentation, the application, the applicant materials and exhibits. This concludes the presentation by staff.
Have any questions for Alfred? Any issues with presentation or admitting everything as such?
I have a couple questions, if I might.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
The exhibits have a couple photographs. There's no dates on those photographs. Do you happen to know when those were taken?
No, I don't. I'm not quite sure when these pictures were presented to staff,
Okay,
but the applicant can probably answer that question.
all right. My second question would be, if this retaining wall were no more than 36 inches high, where it's located right now, it would not be a problem. Is that correct?
Well, according to just talking to Alice earlier, there's really no retaining walls behind any areas where the golf courses are. But I don't think it would be any issue if it was less than 36.
Right, it's, as I understand the PDO, it's allowed in the rear yards as long as it is not more than 36 inches high and is no closer to the property line than a certain distance, and this seems to comply. So it's the height that is the major issue, is that correct?
You're correct.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question, Alfred.
Okay.
In terms of, in the report, it says that obviously the retaining wall was not in the initial application, and then it's discovered that it was there. How does that normally handled by staff? I know you haven't been here as long, but when you find something like that that is different,
Well,
originally approved.
well, like I said, it was originally approved for the build, not the retaining wall, but during the final inspection, staff has known that they noticed the retaining wall, and we talked to the, I guess the applicant. So that's why we're here today.
But how do you normally handle that kind of a thing? I can't think of a similar example of something different, but obviously this is significant in construction. So, when you find something in the field that is different than what was in the application, how do you normally handle that? Or is this,
Well, I mean, we talked to the applicant, of course, to see, ask them why. Sometimes, the applicants don't know, and it's always good, if applicants like just tell us what all they're going to do. So that's why we're here today, to solve this issue, because it's not in compliance, but it's up to the board to make a decision if it's applicable or not.
So even if on the initial plan that was approved, there was not a retaining wall pictured, but if there was a retaining wall on that plan that was, I don't know, say 29 inches, that plan also would have been approved,
You're correct.
correct?
A question. Hey, Alfred, we don't seem to have the picture of the as-built survey for the retaining wall unless I'm missing it in the plans. Do you mind, can we pull that back up?
Okay.
Question on that.
It's in there, yeah.
Is it in there?
It's just not marked red.
It's just not marked red. Okay. Okay.
This, if you see the illustration, right in
Exhibit
front of you.
A3 too.
A marked red. Okay, that's what I
Okay.
was looking for. Okay. Do we have an idea how many feet of this retaining wall are above the 36 inches?
Well, if you look at the retaining wall heights, on the as-built survey, you have, A, B, C, D, and E, and C and D, they're over 36.
Between C and D is over 36.
Yes, C is 38, D is 39. Yes, R and B.
Not related to the retaining wall, but is there a requirement in our PDO for landscaping when you abut a golf course?
Yes,
Just as a question.
yes,
There is?
yes.
Alfred, also, are there any recommendations inside of our PDO? I could not find any that discusses maybe the details of drainage on the back side of the retaining wall.
Can you repeat that question again?
Is there anything in our PDO that maybe details the drainage that should be installed behind a retaining wall?
I am not quite sure, to be honest with you.
I didn't find any. I
Yeah.
just wanted to make sure that I did not overlook that.
Of course.
Is there any pictures of so the wall was put in to prevent further erosion?
Yes, and runoff.
Are there any pictures of the erosion?
No, no pictures at all.
Okay, and was the wall put in after the home was completed?
Yes,
How long after?
I'm unaware of that. The applicant can answer that question.
Any other questions for Alfred at this time? All righty. Well, hearing no further comments for Alfred, I would like to invite the applicant and whoever plans on speaking this afternoon on your behalf. Applicant, owner, whoever plans on conversing with us.
Right here.
No, if you'd have a seat, I'll go ahead and swear you in. Would you please state your name and address for the record?
Yes, my name is Bill Hornbaker. I'm superintendent for Gano Construction.
Okay. And Mr. Hornbecker, do you swear to tell the truth this afternoon in your testimony?
I do.
Wonderful. Well, unless there are any other comments, then you can begin.
Yeah, so to address a few of those questions that I was hearing, that as-built survey, those elevations of that were taken prior to where we are now. We were in the process of backfilling and doing different things there with that wall. So, and we were asked to stop at that time just because of it being a gray area of dealing with that retaining wall. So we stopped bringing more backfill in there. The target elevation of that retaining wall at its highest point is 30 inches. I am not saying here today that it is currently at 30, but that was the intention for it to be no higher than 30. But we were asked to stop backfilling, so we did. And then there was a comment there about drainage. So behind that retaining wall, there is gravel and pipe. That way we could capture that water and move it to the right side of the property and down to the street. And then, so that construction timing of that retaining wall, and let me back up and say, when that project started, Marcel Gano was actually overseeing that project. Although I am a superintendent, I had 22 projects on the ground when he passed. And that one was not one of mine, that was his. So I came in late in the game on that job. So having said that, the permit, as you know, I did that. I'm responsible for building that retaining wall on a footer that was previously poured. The records that I've, I shouldn't say records, but the information that I have is that that footer and all the vertical rebar for that footer was put in prior to framing of the house. So it was there for quite a while. And I elected to not even build a retaining wall there at that time, just due to the fact that the way a contract works with the client, the retaining walls, landscaping, a lot of things are allowance type items. So if I could control everything drainage wise throughout that project and not have to build a retaining wall to save the client money that they could spend elsewhere on some of their other allowances, that was my intention at the time. So we built that house without the retaining wall being there. However, the footer had been. And I made a mistake by assuming that there was a permit for that wall. When I came aboard, there was a footer, so forth, so on. So, I took it upon myself there's supposed to be a retaining wall there. But again, with budget in mind, I tried to avoid that. throughout that process, that lot is a very difficult lot. The one aerial view that you have that actually shows the golf course and things like that, the lay of the land, as you can see from the golf course and the cart path, what's you really can't see there are the two elevated tee boxes, and that cart path runs down through a valley in which all the water does as well. We had erosion problems throughout the entire build. It was, every time it would rain, we knew that we would have an erosion problem. We received phone calls, from Pinehurst, and we addressed them each and every time. And again, the way that the excavation was done on that property, the crawl space and everything was getting water in it all of the time. So we were just having such a difficulty on that I did then go ahead and built a retaining wall. But that retaining wall, again, the footer and foundation for that was in almost from the beginning of the process. So again, I assumed, I should not have done that, but I assumed that there was a permit for that. We have since done the application and for the permit and everything like that. What I do know is now that we got the retaining wall in there, we have no erosion problems. We were able to control everything. The foundation is, the footers, the crawl space, everything is dry. All the water is making it down to the street, and everything seems to be working well right now. So
So I don't mean to cut you off, but just one question I have. So we have the retaining wall shown on the as-built survey.
yes.
If it were, and I don't know if this is a question for you or for staff, but if it were, even if it were going to be under 36 inches, if there were going to be some improvement there, would that be shown on the initial survey to be put for what was expected to be on that lot?
Yeah, if I understood your question correctly, I would say, yes, I'm happy to confirm and get, the grade correct to where it would be 30 inches or under at the highest point. And
Or
have it
I
in the
guess
survey.
initially, if the wall were going to be under 36 inches the whole time, is that something that you would typically request a permit for anyways? Would it need to be permitted? Would it need to be approved as part of that initial plan?
Yes, to my knowledge, that's correct, yes.
Do you have more?
I'm good, yeah.
Okay, there's another one. That's okay. That one and the next
Yeah,
one,
right there.
So it appears that the objective was to create a level backyard for this particular parcel. Is that correct?
Not so much. Again, in the corner of that retaining wall, that grade was initially going to be, brought up a little higher, and then we would then had a swale between the wall and the house. Yeah. Yes, that is correct. As for the, no, I do not know what that is right now. Again, we stopped with the backfilling at the time. Now, we did go ahead and put sod in. It is dormant, so we can easily roll the sod back up and add dirt to that highest elevation. At the highest level, yes, sir. It would be far less as it steps down. Not at this time, it is not. It is approximately 38 or 39 inches.
So, so in other words, it hasn't been taken to 30 inches or 39?
No, sir,
below-
we were asked to stop work on the retaining wall.
But there is sod put down after,
There is sod, yes, and we used rolled sod so we could roll it
and
back.
there is pine straw all around, is that correct?
That is correct.
Let me ask you another question. My understanding of fences and walls is that they're to be constructed with the good side out. This appears that the good side is in. In other words, it's nicely stoned on the inside, but it's kind of raw concrete block on the outside. How do you explain that?
So all the backfilling has not been done. If you look at the other picture, let's see, maybe there is not another pitch that shows that.
Exhibit A41.
Yes, that one. So as you can see, as that backfilling gets done on the golf course side and the neighboring property side, the only exposure that will be after landscaping would be the roll-off, that 4-inch brick roll-off.
Can I ask what landscaping is proposed?
We offered to, on the golf course side, to do anything that you would ask us to do as for any type of hedge barrier, any type of grasses,
Like a row of hollies or something to that effect?
absolutely.
The reason I say that is there's lots of houses on number 6, and I play it all the time, that are probably within 30 feet. This one is in your face 30 feet. I don't mean to be too dramatic, but it really is. Part of it is because, number one, the cart path and that tee box, which is heavily used, sometimes the green tees, almost always the red tees, people stop there and look at the house. So it's right there. Not to say the house isn't attractive. I mean, it's great to see a brick house in a sea of, aluminum sided houses. It's really wonderful to see this full brick construction. But it's really right there. And that's why the wall is obvious and the house is obvious from the golf course. It's very much there and needs significant work, but that's outside the variance issue, but it should be addressed. So relative to the wall being good on the outside, is there any plan to put brick at least down a foot or so on the outside?
There was no plan for that, simply because it's a, the width of the wall, it's approximately a 12-inch wall. I really feel that when it is fully landscaped, and especially if we do something on the golf course side, it would not be exposed, except for the top 4-inch of the brick that's shown.
How about the neighboring side?
That would be the same way.
Because the next picture is the neighboring side, right? If you go down one. This is the neighboring side, right?
Yes.
How will you plan to fill this so it isn't exposed?
Again, we would bring some more backfill up. I can see where there would be a small portion of that highest point, a corner portion of it would be shown as stucco. If that's a problem, we could address something.
So that will be stuccoed,
Yeah, that's what that is right now. It has,
good and painted, yeah.
yeah.
But the intention is to fill it as much as possible so that you only see the brick.
Correct.
So we're being assured that with the grading and fill on both sides, including the house side, the height of the wall maximum will be what,
30.
30 inches?
Yes, sir.
So doesn't it seem to me that one of the biggest concerns is that the retaining wall was not on the site plan as presented to the village initially? Am I reading that correctly? Maybe that's a question for us. But it was not on the site plan as given to the village initially.
Understand, yes.
Then it was found during the permitting process, and you were asked at that point in time to cease operations of the retaining wall. Is that correct, what I'm hearing?
During one of the, I think it was during one of the inspections that we were having, is when it was then brought to my attention, hey, you need to do something, you need to stop with the retaining wall. And of course, by that time, the retaining wall was almost done. And so it was noted to me, again, probably somewhere in around one of the electrical or some inspection that we're having. I don't recall exactly when it was, but the wall was built when it was brought to my attention. We then discontinued the backfilling, and then it was a few weeks later as we were out there backfilling that I believe it was Scott had called me on a Friday and asked me to just stop anything that has anything to do with the retaining wall. So we did.
At that point in time, it is where the measurements that we got, which was the 39 inches and whatever the other one was.
That's
above-
correct.
Above 36 inches.
That's correct.
Excuse me, board, I'd like to make a clarification. According to section 9.13, fences, walls, and columns, fences, walls, and similar structures are prohibited in the rear setback if the lot abuts a golf course or a lake. But I'm also looked at the, the definition of a fence, a structure 18 inches or taller used to delineate a boundary or as a barrier or means of protections, confinement, screenings, or as an aesthetic component of landscaping. I just want to make a clarification.
So what you're saying
Could you
there-
repeat that,
Yeah,
please?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Okay, according to section 913, fences, walls, and columns, fences, walls, and similar structures are prohibited in the rear setback if the lot abuts a golf course or a lake. I know according to our definitions regarding fences, it states a structure 18 inches or taller used to delineate a boundary or as a barrier or means of protection, confinement, screening, or as an aesthetic component of landscaping.
Right, I guess I read that not necessarily pertaining to retaining walls, since that's under letter B, and retaining walls are specifically described under F. Is that the?
Yes.
But to your point, Alfred, I want to make sure I have this clear. Are you stating that reading of the PDO would then state that regardless if they were to bring this down to 30 inches, it still would not be in compliance with the PDO?
Well, according to the PDO, walls may not be, it may not abut a golf course or a lake.
At all, of over 18 inches?
Correct.
Okay, so, and so back to that point, I guess.
I think it's vague. I
Think
think
it's
the
vague?
PDO is vague.
Okay.
That's my thought on that. Not that everybody has to think that, but.
Fair enough. Billy, to that point, I guess I want to make sure everybody always knows that the position that this board is in a lot of times is strict application of the ordinances. And it really comes down to trying to determine if it's a true hardship or not that requires us to not enforce that ordinance upon you, So that is what's a lot in our head, is really, and I don't think I plan on holding against you that the wall is already built. The question in my mind is, does a wall need to be there in the first place in this height? So for me, that was kind of where I was going with some of those questions. So at this point in time, I'm guessing the village stance is to the PDO that even if you were to bring it down to 30 inches, it still would not be in compliance with the PDO, and I think we'll discuss some of that here in a few minutes. But do you have any input on that at all?
No, I thought it was 36 inches for the retaining walls. My complete oversight was the fact that it was not permitted from the original time. Again, timing-wise for me coming on and trying to fulfill the contract after Marcel's passing, I assumed that everything was in order with the permitting.
So I'm trying to figure out why we're having a hearing now.
Yeah, that was where
But,
it actually was.
So in other words, section 9.13, fences, walls, and columns, number 1, B1. And I'll read this section here. It says, fences, walls, and similar structures not over 6 feet in height may project into the rear or side setback, provided the lot does not abut a golf course or a lake. Fences, walls, and similar structures are prohibited in the rear setback if the lot abuts a golf course or a lake. Is that what the issue is here?
That's where I was going
Right.
at first.
I mean, it goes on to talk about, the finished side has to be out, but less importantly, goes on to say that retaining walls higher than 36 inches shall not encroach the front setback for primary structures or the rear or side setbacks for secondary structures. So in other words, it allows up to 36 inches in the rear setback, but the previous section that I read prohibits them completely in the rear yard of a golf course abutting lot. So it isn't a matter of this not be made conforming, it's period not conforming is what it comes down to. Is that right?
I think that's part of our conversation.
Right, okay.
So,
I asked one final question. I'm sorry, it's a little bit off topic than that, but the footers were poured at an earlier stage in construction, and I'm going to guess that were they poured at a similar date as well as maybe the footers for the house in general?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. So at the same time, just for clarity, you're stating we went ahead and poured the footers out of some sort of a precaution and for a decision that we would make at a later time.
I would assume that would have been Marcel's intention. Sitting here today, when I-
If you would mind, just, what would your thoughts be? We can't assume, or
Yeah.
take statements or what people might have thought, who can't.
Yeah,
be
so,
here to
so my
testify.
thought was and is today that there was to be a retaining wall on that job site. And I eventually did construct one. However, again, budget in mind, I tried for the longest time, for months and months, to contain the water and erosion, and just could not do it. Couldn't keep water out of the crawl space. The golf course just dumps just a lot of water onto that particular property.
Would assume that's probably the reason why that lot is built very last in that development. You 13,000 square foot lot, you had to change the grade 14 feet. Anybody knows you're going to have water problems. I mean, so I think it was mandatory from the very beginning that you did something to retain water. Okay, here we are stuck in a situation where the poor homeowners, who probably didn't pull out a transom or understand the elevation and the challenges with water coming off a, golf course, you start to eliminate alternatives. Alternative is remove the wall and then consistently have water in your crawl space.
Now, I've had to go as far as even have a pre-treat, for mold done in that crawl space. And again, since the wall's been there now for a while, and since we've had the wall, we don't have any more problems.
You have a house on the downside of this one. I guess so are you causing problems to them with runoff now? Because it appeared in your, photos that the grade slopes down to that.
Yeah, so we are not, we are actually capturing the water as you can see, we have several feet of gravel behind the wall with a pipe in it. And then on the downhill side, once you get beyond that wall, now that we've got some finer grading done on that side, the grade is contoured to where any water that gets into that backyard goes down our driveway on a 411 Shinnecossett.
Okay, so you've got it somewhat sloped up, so there's, if you will, a trough that collects that water and moves it to the street, so it's not flooding the neighbor.
That is correct.
Okay, did you ever think about putting more than a trough, some piping, collection base, make a collection basin and move that? Was that considered at all?
So the water that we capture behind that wall is piped clear down to the street.
Okay,
The only other water that we get now is just the backyard water. Have not seen a need for any type of catch basin at this point. Where we do have the swell from the backyard to the homeowner's driveway, where that swell is, if we have any issues there, then we would line that with river rock, put in a catch basin, we would do something like that. But thus far, I don't have any erosion onto the neighboring property.
Billy,
Of course, that golf tee actually provides a little bit of a berm and protects that property, quite honestly. And when you develop that property, you clear cut the backyard. There were, according to this diagram, the tree inventory, there was at least 8 significant trees back there, pines and hardwoods that were just clear cut. The entire backyard was clear cut. I mean, that's a bit of your problem, isn't it? Took out all the vegetation that would in fact
So
help
with the,
help with a runoff issue.
so with that overall gradient of the lot prior to construction, as that gentleman had mentioned, it was like 14 feet of gradient. So, so to be able to get somewhat of a level home site in there, I would imagine that any trees left on such a slope would have had to have gone anyway.
Well, if you look up and down the street, and you can see it in your pictures, there's a significant number of trees in the other residents up and down the streets, and they have a slope from the golf course to their house also.
Yeah,
The choice looks like it was to clear cut and try to provide a level backyard, and therefore the demand was for some type of retaining wall. I mean, one led to the other.
lots are just not meant to be built on.
Bill,
so,
Be very careful when you.
yeah, so I can't argue that point, but what I can say is by me not building that retaining wall for months on end in hopes that I would never have to, it was solely a water issue that we had, and we fought it constantly. Anyone from the village would tell you that they constantly were calling for erosion.
Well, again, we'll, please disregard the last comment unless we have commentary from the village here tonight to confirm that. We won't be able to consider that, unfortunately. I do want to consider one thing. I do think there's a difference between a fence or a wall, and a retaining wall. I don't think a retaining wall would have been specifically defined separately in here if they didn't intend for it to be treated and managed differently. I think, fences, walls, what you typically see there is privacy. You're obscuring a sight line to some extent. Retaining walls have different purposes overall, different engineering requirements. So I do think we are in, as far as our PDO goes, section 9.13F, although we're on a golf course, I don't see, I don't believe we're in section B. So although we're on a golf course, I do think the retaining wall section applies, and therefore, if this were under 36 inches, I don't think it would be an issue.
I think That certainly puts us in a decision-making process that I think that we're going to have to discuss.
Yeah, yeah.
If you don't mind, I just have a couple questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
For Billy, before we kind of get to that point,
Yep.
because I think that's going to take some extensive discussion on our behalf. In reality, I think that's a fair point. Billy, I got three things really. So currently in your crawl space, do you have a sump pump installed?
There is no sub pump installed in that
Do
crawl
not have a
space.
sump pump, dehumidifier at all?
Not at this point.
Currently do not. Okay.
Currently do not.
So you don't feel that you need one at this point in time due to
We-
the retaining wall? Is
We
that
do
correct?
not at this time, correct.
Okay.
It has been dry.
Okay. And so when you're clearing a lot, and we've got a smaller lot, and we have trees, you made a point earlier I would like you to expand on. I don't want the words in your mouth. You said, hey, those trees would have to go anyway. Can you expand on that a little bit of why they would have to go?
Yeah, so, you know, if you, without trying to complicate it, but if you look at the gradient marks on the site survey, you can see how dramatic they would be, and you can see where the rear setback of that house comes right to that rear step. You would have, in less than 30 feet, you would have approximately 4, maybe up to 6 feet of gradient in that distance. And then by going in there and cutting all of that out, you know, on the low side to get a level spot there, the trees then are just exposed. And even still,
Be a good chance of them dying during the construction process?
yeah, I mean, you would definitely get into the root bed, and that's what I mean, it'd be on such a steep slope there. It doesn't look bad now, but it was dramatic for, you know.
They hinder your grading overall at some point?
And, you know, it just keeps the house in safety, you know, from the trees coming down.
Last question I got, unless you want to expand on that, is, so we have a side entry garage, which has moved the house over a little bit to allow the space to have a side entry garage. Can you expand the decision-making on that for me and why it was not a front entry garage? Was that a preference of the homeowner or yourself for the house design, or can you expand on that?
So that was the preference of the homeowner, and the reason for that is if you were to look at that front elevation, we have several steps, you know, to get from garage. The driveway is so steep that they felt like if they just came straight in the garage, they would never have a level spot at all. So that their vehicle would always be on that slope. So with it being a side entry, they have the opportunity to come up and get leveled out and get it, you know.
Actually pull into the garage without.
And they
a
are,
drastic slope.
you know, quite elderly. You know, the husband, he gets around quite well, but his wife is quite elderly, and we, you know, try to reduce as many steps as possible for her.
Fair enough. If the house would have had a front entry garage and then would have been slid over to the other setback side, would you be in the need of a retaining wall in the back still?
I would have to say, that the garage would have had to been the house would have had to been totally flipped.
For a front entry garage?
Yes, to avoid having that retaining wall, we would have to flip the house and slid the house over.
And slid the house over? Would that then be a front entry garage or still be a side entry garage at that point? And does that do,
I think at any point, it would have to be a side entry, just from the grade, from the front elevation of the house to the street,
but again, kind of, at this point in time, you have a 4-foot grading elevation from the front to the back of the lot. Is that right? Or did I hear that right earlier?
yeah, so like from the back porch over to where that grass is.
Oh, to the back porch, okay.
Yeah, from, the back corner of the house, yeah.
Okay, I think that's fair enough, thank you.
Were any other measures taken to cure the drainage before putting the wall up?
Other than just trying to create berms and swales. Other than that, that was it, but everything just washes, washed to the street.
Mr. Hornbecker, I just have one question for you. So in your opinion as superintendent, for how many years have you worked in this field?
30 plus.
Okay. So from where we sit today, if this retaining wall were to be removed, what would be the impact to the property?
We would go back to the same water issues that we fought from the beginning of the project, and homeowner would have water in their crawl space.
Okay, and what means would be necessary to stabilize the property in its current condition without the retaining wall?
A retention pond.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I'm good. I don't have any questions.
Further questions? Right now? Do we have any other folks present who would like to speak tonight? Yep, if you could step forward, ma'am. If it's just, if you have comments, I see Susie McAuliffe. Is that you? Okay. Okay. Can you hold on to those until we get you sworn in? Sorry. Yeah, you can take a seat wherever he was sitting. Can you please state your name and address for the record?
It's Susie McAuliffe, and it's 13 Shinnecossett Lane.
And Ms. McAuliffe, do you swear to tell the truth this afternoon in your testimony?
I do.
Thank you. What do we have here in front of us?
It's pictures that I took as the adjoining homeowner throughout the project.
As the neighbor, you personally took these pictures
I
and
did.
can authenticate
They're-
that they're
They were
part
on my
of
cell
this
phone.
property?
And I
Okay.
printed them.
Do any of you have any issue with admitting?
Haven't seen them?
Oh, sorry. Well, here these are. I mean, if she took the pictures and can authenticate that,
Right.
they are what they say.
Well, the date's on the cell phone. It's not on the pictures itself, but I could go back at any time and get, because it's all dated on the phone.
I don't have any issues admitting these in. It looks like they are labeled differently than what we have. So the picture's labeled Exhibit A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M. We didn't quite get to Z, but Exhibits A through M. You personally took these pictures?
I did.
Okay. I don't have any issue admitting these. Does anyone have any problems admitting these as evidence? Perfect.
And you are the house down, so to speak, from this,
You see where
On
that
the upper-
grass, you see where the grass is? That's my property on this photo right now. I'm right.
you're
I'm-
uphill, correct, okay.
If you'd like to
Okay.
speak.
So does the uniqueness of this lot create a hardship? My answer is no. When listed for sale, this property, 11 Shinnecossett Lane, was described as a golf front with a gentle slope from the road up to the 15th tee and fairway. That's Exhibit A and B. Uneven and sloping land is common among golf front lots, especially in number 6. That's how Tom Fazio designed the course. He built it so that the homes would wind through the neighborhood, and that includes my own. I sit on a slope. This lot was not unique, thus no hardship was encountered to build a single-family home. Who created the hardship? Well, prior to the build, the grade of the lot was equal to the golf course and adjoining properties, Exhibit C. And those trees along the side were all the ones that were knocked down on that exhibit. But the grade was level. The builder created the hardship by excavating without submitting an erosion plan to the state. And I confirm this, her name is Penny Markle, and she works for the NCDEQ, and she never got an erosion plan. She was never aware.
Please disregard unless she's here
Okay.
to testify tonight.
Okay.
Thank you.
So no receipt was ever sent to the state of the erosion plan. That's Exhibit D and E, which show how deep the excavation was and how far back it went to the setback lines. After the foundation was laid, no soil was returned to the setback areas to preserve the existing soil structure and limit erosion and runoff. The wall was not needed if the proper erosion prevention measures had been taken in the first place. Erosion continues due to the height of the wall over the land, and that's Exhibit F and G. Gannett Construction wanted to build a wall and did. A wall not on the improved site plan, not permitted, and in violation of a 30-foot setback. Exhibit H shows an excavated lot with the installation of steel rebar to support a retaining wall back in July 2021. 1 year later, wall construction began. During that year, significant erosion took place on my adjoining property. That's Exhibit I. It looks like a swamp, according to that picture. Gannett Construction was notified in September of 2022 that the wall was not on the approved site plan and also violated the 30-foot setback. The permit office provided them with two options: apply for a variance or remove the wall. Instead of waiting for the variance hearing outcome, the wall was backfilled and landscaped. Exhibit J. Jamie Bowles' office was shocked that a stop work order was not issued by the village after the violation. A custom home builder with 30 years of experience in Moore County was not aware of a setback rule. I find that extremely hard to believe. With the wall built, in this case, it's easier to ask for forgiveness than for permission in the first place. Approving this variance would be injustice, I believe, to the golfers, my adjoining property, and public safety would not be secured. The wall is dangerously close to the cart path and with a steep vertical drop-off. The Village of Pinehurst risks a lawsuit by an injured golfer. The purpose and spirit of a setback ordinance is to protect the village's highly visible and prime properties, namely its golf courses. Pinehurst Resorts benefits as a premier golf destination to the tune of $103.5 million annually. Why would you want to risk Pinehurst's reputation, economy, and change in overall landscape that was designed in 1979 by Bob Fazio? The wall was not needed to build a single-family residence at 11 Shinnecossett. A gentle slope did not create a hardship. The real hardship is in the erosion, the runoff, and loss of value to my property right next door. And that's Exhibits K, L, and M. Rules are designed to keep Pinehurst safe and beautiful for current and future residents. And I do not believe violation of these rules should be taken lightly.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely.
Can you give us any sort of date, time frame, specifically between picture Exhibit I and J?
I have to get my copy, hold on.
To restate, could you give us a time frame between the pictures that you took of Exhibit I and Exhibit J?
So in I'm not sure the time frame, but the house is done because there's the porch right there and the rebar is there, but obviously the wall hasn't been built yet. So that time frame was, once the rebar was installed, it was over a year before anything was done. So you can imagine the runoff on the property for a course of a year.
But a generality time, if you don't have an exact time frame, or we can even go back to Exhibit H. Do you have a time, do you have at least a month or any specific time frame that we can use for reference for Exhibit H, I, or K? And then, I'm sorry, J.
Okay, so H was after the foundation was laid and the property was excavated. So this was around July to August of 2021, H.
And then, can you give me an idea of J?
Okay, it's just recently, there was backfill, and then over the course of this past week, there's been a crew out there working, and they laid the pine straw and put in some shrubbery, and they laid the grass in the backyard and the front yard and landscaped the property. It's done.
What you're testifying to is that there's been work on the wall, specifically landscaping, you just here recently,
Yes,
to continue.
within this past week. The sod was laid today in the backyard and the front yard.
Find the sod was laid today.
Yes.
Again, based on the separate section of the PDO that addresses retaining walls, and this will be more for our discussion, I do believe it is a different setback standard than what the typical requirement would be for a fence or a regular wall, so to speak.
Chairman, I think you're correct, and I think that that's well, I don't know if you're correct on that statement, but I think that's a conversation that we should have maybe after we close the public.
Yeah. That's fine.
I think it's a fair statement, but I think to have the discussion today, or at this point in time, I think would be a little bit premature.
Absolutely,
If you don't mind respectfully saying that.
even if it was disrespectfully said.
I'm sorry.
Are you having any water problems in your crawl space or around your building? I may have missed that when you,
My crawl space has not been checked. It has been insulated for actually more than that, 15 years now. And so it's regularly, it's checked every year.
minus the pictures that you provided, which are pretty good, what erosion is occurring on your side? You're on the
I
high.
have lost 6.5 inches of soil. I actually already sent the village, I don't have it on here, but my propane tank was just the lid, which was about 1 inch above. It is now exposed like this, 6.5 inches of soil.
Contractor reached out to you and said that they were going to do anything to take care of that?
No, I was told by the village of Pinehurst I had to hire an attorney.
Did anyone come to you?
No.
Did you ask them?
No.
So you don't have any sort
But there's
of-
never been flooding on this property. I will tell you that the house that I'm currently living in was constructed in 1993. And there is in the backyard, there is, I guess it's called a berm, so there's trees. Because I sit on the slope too, I'm sitting on the same 15th green, or tee box. But there's a berm there with trees and plants to stop runoff from happening.
Obviously, it's a different lot, it's a different parcel, but to your.
It's a different lot, but it's still sloping, because almost every lot, I think in number 6, because of the way the design of the course, is sloping.
Yeah.
I don't know too many people that have a flat lot. In fact, there's a house on St. George's that has a much steeper grade than anything I've ever seen, and they do not have a retaining wall. They actually cannot even pull into their driveway. They have to back up before they get into, that's how steep it is. And they're down from a tee box.
Watch the construction, have been living with this for a year. Is there any recommendations that you would come up with or suggest?
I think that before a build happens, I think the neighbors should be notified. I just don't think that's correct. Like one day, the trees were being marked, and another day, the construction happened. And I was dealing with a mom that was ill, and it was terrible. And I don't know why you have to, I'm not a a builder, so I don't know why you have to dig all the way into the setback and not refill the soil when you have a vertical cut in the, it seems to me you should leave, and I've read about this enough to leave some soil on the site and put it back. But I do think the neighbors need to be notified, and if you're going to put a wall up that's right next to a property line, there needs to be communication there.
How long have you lived in, at 13 Shinnecossett?
I took care of both my parents, who were quite ill, and have passed on, so it has been about over 10 years.
And the lot's been vacant the whole time?
Oh, no, they built in 1993. It was my
No,
parents.
the neighboring lot.
Yes, it was co-owned by the person to the right of that, and then they sold it in 2015.
And during the time, your parents lived at 13 Shinnecossett?
Mm-hmm.
Did they ever, well, I won't ask that because you can't speak for them.
I can tell you there was,
But any neighbor on that road could have also purchased the lot.
yes,
Anybody who didn't want a home built next to them could have purchased the lot.
well, the neighbor had asked my dad to split the lot, but obviously, when you split a cost with someone and one person passes away or one person gets sick, it makes for a very difficult situation. So he did not agree to that. But I can tell you that my property never has suffered the erosion that's in those pictures. I was present at the house during the hurricane in 2018 with 14 inches of rain, not a drop. On the side of the house, nothing, no rain, no erosion at all,
For our
no
clar-
loss of soil.
For our clarification, we're speaking of loss of soil and erosion. I'm just trying to put a little bit of facts behind that the best we can. You have a great depiction of that in Exhibit K, in my opinion. Are there any other examples that you have pictured, possibly of your propane tank or anything else in these pictures?
I have it on my phone, but I had given it to the town previously of the propane. But it is, yeah, it's about 6.5 inches. But I don't have it here.
That's around your propane tank. You're stating that there's been some erosion of about 6.5 inches.
Yes.
Where is, just for an idea for us, because I don't think there's a way for us to tell, where does your propane tank sit on your lot and how close to this property?
So if you look at Exhibit C, it would be to the left of that first pine tree right there, and further back towards the street from that. But very close to about 6 feet away from the property line.
You, going back to your exhibits A and B, one is like the listing. And there's 3 pictures on the listing.
Yes.
One is obviously of the picture of the golf course. They'd love to take a picture of what a beautiful view. But the other 2 pictures, are they representative of, or are they the same as Exhibit B? And are they of the back of the subject parcel?
This Exhibit B was taken from the person that was selling the lot,
Okay,
the realtor, and it's from the street up. The reason I didn't print the other 2 pictures was because the first one with the golf path really just takes the
Right.
course. And this particular one on the left here was so dark you couldn't really see anything anyway.
Right.
And that was taken from the top of the lot down.
so Exhibit B, you're saying, is from, it looks like, what, say, the middle of the lot, straight back towards the golf course? Is
Yes. Middle, back, yes, and there's the fairway.
Last question I've got, or maybe. So the elevated tee boxes and the cart path, do you feel that they direct water onto your property?
The cart path does slope down, but I think that berm stops it, because I do not have any flooding in my backyard, which is a grassy area. It's a small grassy area, but the berm was long enough, and with the plants, and I have 4 crepe myrtles, I have 3 other trees, and then there's shrubbery on either side. No.
But if you do, you feel that the current elevation of your lot relative to the elevation in the property of the Pinehurst Golf Course actually keeps that from happening. Is that what I'm hearing? In a way, you're talking about the burn and you're talking.
I think the burn stops it because my neighbor to the left of me, for example, she has no backyard.
Okay,
She has a direct drop-off. So that's 15 Shinnecossett. She wasn't allowed to have a backyard because of the way that's the highest tee box on the 15th tee.
okay,
And then comes my property. So it's slowly coming down. The slope comes down, but then it's equal with the 15th tee. So I don't see the difference between the lot at 11 versus my lot in terms of the tee box. The height is the same.
and the burn, is it on your property?
Yes.
Okay.
Because there's 2 pine trees in the rear side of the burn that I don't own. The golf course owns them.
Whether that burn was natural, or did you create it in any sense?
I didn't have a lot to go on. I looked at pictures. There were only a few of when my parents built the home. And I can tell you that the backyard was not excavated. I could still see the grass and the pine trees from that shot of someone taking the rear of the house. So yes, they created the burn, but they also did not excavate all the way to the back, no. It's hard for me to say for all that because I wasn't living there, but I do have pictures.
Oh, it's okay, thank you.
Okay.
McAuliffe?
I don't. Jeremy's questions help me.
You have anything else, Ms. McAuliffe?
No, I just wanted to say one thing, and that is when you were talking about people stop and stare, and I just want to say that I have been witness to that for the past year and a half of people stopping or staring, or if I'm even working in the backyard, asking me what is going on. But I will tell you, and you probably can't, but the general consensus is that the wall stands out. And that's pretty much why I'm here too, because I don't believe there's any other home, unless you can prove me wrong, on number 6 that has a retaining wall in this golf course setback. It's a restrictive golf course setback, and that's what the permit office told me when I learned about this meeting, and that it was in direct violation of that setback, regardless of the height. Thank you very much.
We do have one more person signed up here, Mr. Higginbottom. Can you please state your full name and address for the record?
Sure, Richard Higginbotham, 80 Carolina Vista, would be my work address, and that's who I'm representing today.
And Mr. Higginbotham, do you swear today to tell the whole truth during your testimony?
I do.
Thank you.
Obviously, to the extent that you find this compliant, we would withdraw some of these comments, but I do.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but you're speaking on behalf of?
Pinehurst Resort, the owner of the golf course.
Thank you.
Sorry. First off, I fully agree with most of what was said by the previous speaker on behalf of the resort. We do find this wall relatively close to a cart path and relatively dangerous from that standpoint. We certainly do have some feeling for the builder and for the homeowner, and certainly, as you all well know, when people are coming here with requests about the golf setback, they normally have a letter from my office that they've come to us and we've discussed it and we have approved their request for variance because we have had an opportunity to look at what was being requested and had our ability to provide feedback. We had no ability to provide feedback on this. Obviously, if it had been presented to us, we would not have approved it as it currently is situated. We find it's too close to the cart path. And obviously, the 30-foot wouldn't work either because, as the builder pointed out in this application, that's within 2 feet of the house, and that doesn't make any sense either. I think we could have found some compromise, but it was never presented to us. But according to my records, there's 16 lots on the right side of the fairway. of 15th fairway of number 6, most with similar or even more extreme topography as that of the applicant at 11 Shinnecock Lane. What's the precedent here if we simply allow the other 15 to start building without permission? What is the precedent for the other golf courses if we simply allow encroachment and ask forgiveness later? I'm having to adjust this a little bit, having heard some of the discussion. One, we disagree with some of the other comments. It is not necessary to build a wall to control water. Grass, landscaping, and in-ground drainage does a perfectly acceptable job of moving water and controlling water. And on a personal note, I live on Linden Road, and those who know my lots, it drops 30 feet from Linden Road to the back of the house, and there's no retaining walls there. Two, the retaining wall does have an effect on others. It is obviously visible to the neighbors. As Mr. Farrell pointed out, the look of it, which cannot be covered by dirt, no matter what they say, looking at that angle, I can tell you right now, it's going to be exposed. So the neighbors can see it, the golf course can see it, and we do not believe it's consistent with the 30-foot, the concept of a 30-foot setback. Lastly, and again agreeing with the previous speaker, the very thing that makes number 6 such a great golf course is the topography. And that topography is going to make it difficult for certain houses to be, or lots to be built on. That was always understood. But also in reviewing the requirements, number 2 that were up on the screen a minute ago, the language states in part, the hardship results from conditions that are particular to this property. There's nothing particular about this property as you look at the golf courses in the lots around number 6. This is relatively common along every one of those 15 parcels. And if you look across the street, you can see the topography is even more extreme. So Pinehurst obviously does not agree with this variance application to the extent that we feel it does violate the terms or the ordinances. Obviously, if you find it does comply, then we have one of the requests. We do not want to see, we want to see landscaping that is consistent with the golf course along all sides, which would be grasses, high grasses, low grasses, and other things, and stuff, and something that can protect a cart from going over that wall should someone be distracted as they're looking at the house and wondering how close it is to the golf course. Thank you.
I have a question.
Sure.
Mr. Chickenbottom, so in talking about what you would like to see, should it be allowed to remain, obviously the grasses that are there are not what you're referring to as what you'd like to see. You're talking about something more substantial?
Well, it looks like those are the existing grasses. And it looks like in putting in the stone that you saw in one of the early images, they took out what was ever there before. So yes, we would like it made more dense and with higher grasses and some texture there so that it will disappear into the golf course. Again, we do not think that will stop a golf cart from going over the edge should someone be distracted. But if we're going to landscape it, that's the way it should be landscaped, as opposed to having hedges or something else, I personally think.
Yeah, understood. Appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. I do not have a topography layout. I did talk to Mr. Farron, who is our Director of Golf Course Maintenance, and at the 15th green, they're paving right now as well. I mean, he's trying to level that part out as well, that particular lot owner. So yes, we're quite familiar with this from just the nature of dealing with the neighbors. Yes, I do.
Has Pinehurst made any topography changes along the backside of this lot that may affect the water runoff in the recent, let's say, 5 years of
No.
this lot?
The last thing that I know was done on that particular hole was the construction of the bathrooms in the back of the tee, which would have been 2006, 2005, something like that,
Well before.
well before.
For Mr. Higginbotham?
Nope.
You have anything further?
No.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Hearing none further and having no one else on the list, is there anyone else in the audience who would like to speak at this time? Okay. I think we'll still leave the public hearing open, just in case we have any questions from the applicant or the property owner. But do we need to collect anything further at this point, or do you feel comfortable to discuss?
If we're moving beyond this point, I think now it would be proper to have that discussion. I mean, I think we do need some clarity, or at least some discussion on how the PDO applies in this instance. I think that it's fair to have a discussion around the clarity of that. And I know Jack had some input, as well as I know Matt was looking into it. I was reading it as well, along with your point.
So to that point, and this is just with statutory interpretation overall, if something is silent, you can't read language into something. So you can't, if retaining walls were not included separately, then, I think they would fall under that definition of fences, walls, similar structures. But having that separate definition signals that they were intended to be viewed differently. So I think in regard to requirements for retaining walls, that section F is what we need to consider. So if,
So wait a minute, hold on. So you're saying that you're making a judgment that section 9.13 relative to fences and walls that are not permitted in the golf course setback for lots that have a golf course, that abut a golf course, you're saying that doesn't apply? That word walls, this isn't a wall?
it's a retention wall, which has a separate definition and a separate section which addresses how they are allowed.
Is retention wall defined in
Is,
section 10
and, well,
of the PDO?
wall is defined and retaining wall separately. So wall is defined as an erection of stone, brick, wood, metal, or other material intended to delineate a boundary or serve as a barrier, or means of protection, confinement, screening, or as an aesthetic component of landscaping. Whereas retaining wall is defined as a wall designed to prevent the lateral displacement or movement of soil or other material. So that seems to be consistent with what.
So the definitions make it consistent that this section does not apply, 9.13, B1.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, but F would as a retaining wall. With what's, all we can really consider is what's, in these documents in front of us, what we've had admitted as evidence in the testimony that's been provided. And throughout the build, there were issues experienced with runoff, although it was stated that the footers were poured from the beginning. Whether it would have been, well, the testimony that we have is that the wall, if there weren't any drainage issues, then it wouldn't have been constructed. They, basically would have kept it out of place in that event. You can come to a different,
I'd like to point out, however, that given the pictures of the excavation during the clearing of the lot, kind of may show a little bit of a different story.
well, I agree with you, but I keep coming back to the point, if we're looking at 9.13F, which considers retaining walls specifically, it would be a non-issue. You know, even if they cleared it out and the wall was 30 inches at its, or below 36 inches at its highest point, then it would be allowed into the accessory structure setback, if I'm reading that correctly.
Okay. I can follow that point. I think the point that I'll just challenge in the comment is that, or at least would like to have a discussion on if this is the way we go, is whether the retaining wall was planned possibly the whole time, given the picture of grading of the lot, before they even could have known there would have been any sort of drainage issues to the house, because at that point in time, there would be no footers, there would be no crawl space, there would be no example of water coming into the home. Certainly given after certainly, and honestly as well, after excavating, we can use that term, after clearing the lot to this level, it also is arguable that any sort of water that could come into the crawl space or that house could have been caused by that drastic clearing of the lot. So, yeah, so I'm willing to follow the other point. I just wanted to make sure we had a discussion on that at a concurrent point along with that. So if you clear a lot to this point and then we pour our footers, obviously at that point in time, it's different.
But
Slope doesn't even play. Actually, it then pulls the water into that point, and then where's it going to go?
So you're speaking to, did the hardship result as, come as a result of the clearing? That's kind of what you're speaking to there.
Well, no, David had just made the point that, hey, would the wall even be put into place if there was not any sort of drainage issues to the home? And the point that I would just like to make is there was no way to tell.
Yeah.
At that point in time. That's the only point. If we want to discuss, I think it is fair, David's point is very fair to have a discussion that we are currently now on what is the application of the PDO and interpretation.
Well, and that's where and I don't know if it's a question for staff, but if the grading were allowed to continue to make sure that the highest point were no greater than 36 inches, would we be here? And to me, the answer is no. It seems like it was caught and addressed before the work could have been finished, but Darren or Alfred, can you
swear Darren
answer
in.
that? Darren, would you mind being sworn in? Please state your name and.
Darren Birch,
Thank you. Do you swear
Director of
to
Planning Inspections for the Village of Pinehurst.
tell the truth this afternoon?
I do.
Thank you.
Listening to the way you're discussing the staff interpretation or the interpretation of the PDO, I can tell you historically, we have interpreted that fences, walls, columns, or similar structures cannot be in that golf course setback. Now, if it's under 18 inches, historically, we have not regulated it. Anything over 18 inches, we have regulated, and the staff's interpretation has not been to permit such structures to be placed in the golf course setback. Again, it's been a staff interpretation.
So that's another piece to the puzzle, right?
Correct.
That
Correct.
the structure is over 18 inches,
Correct?
which historically we have not permitted
That's correct.
in the golf course setback.
Correct.
But the comment was made by someone that there's not a lot of retaining walls towards golf carts, on the side where the golf courses are. So I'm curious if you can recall any instances where it was a retaining wall that somebody, and not just a fence or that kind of boundary, because there is a distinction.
There is a distinction between, definitely in the PDO, as you've,
Sure.
as you're finding out, there's two different distinctions, or there's two different subsections within the wall section. I can't tell you, we would have to do a record search of fences, and fortunately, we do keep a lot of historical fence permits, so we could do some type of search, but I can't, as of right now, I can't give any answer on that.
Darren, at this point in time, I'm looking for the right word, the interpretation of the PDO from village staff is that the retaining wall apply to the same definition of as a wall inside of the setback.
That is correct, sir.
Although in the application, it's written with regard to section F. So while that was brought up in this discussion, nothing that we have is with that consideration. Everything is evaluated under 913F. So how should we take that, Darren? I know you didn't put this application together.
We would have to, you're right, that is an error in the review of the application. We should have been applying that standard, that standard as well. There should have been two standards. It should have been the over 36 inches, and it should have been that 9 point, was it, you have in front of you, 9.3, the one that, 9.1.32, whatever that is, that prohibits fences, fences, walls, or similar structures within the lake or golf course setback.
9.13 B1 prohibits
Correct.
walls.
That should be the other section that should be cited.
What is the staff's interpretation of what's a good side of a fence or a wall? As you look at these two sides in the picture.
Well, if it was a fence, our staff, if it was a fence, the staff interpretation would be that the outside that you see would not be the good side. So you'd have to apply this, whatever's
stone to the
exposed would be,
the other side.
correct. That is correct.
Just for clarification, we just mentioned something about a permit, but this wall, retention wall, whatever it is, was not in the permit, right? Okay, but it's clear when you look at Exhibit D and E, you had to put some type of wall or you wouldn't have the cart path by now. It would have been washed away. I mean, you removed 6 feet of soil.
Say that again?
So in the original permit, the wall was not there.
Right.
Okay, I'm just, a leap of logic here. There's no way to retain that much soil without
Well,
constructing
not after
something.
you excavate it. That was.
Correct.
So
Correct.
it was, the question comes back to who caused the hardship? And why was the hardship, why is the hardship present?
Well,
I interpret the hardship as present because, to some extent, the clear cutting occurred. The excavation occurred to create a level backyard versus all the other houses on that street, which have a sloping backyard from the golf course. That precipitated a self-caused hardship to cause the need for a retaining wall. So that precipitated the need for the retaining wall.
Now,
That's pretty logical.
just to respond logic to that point, I just play devil's advocate to it, that if you wanted a side entry garage, then the house would come over and then increase the need for a retaining wall, even if it was slightly.
Well, I'm looking at the backyard, okay? And the backyard pictures that were submitted by the public show a reasonably sloping, probably a 4-foot slope over 20, 30 feet maybe. But that's not unusual on that area, that topography. I mean, the whole golf course, that whole slopes towards those houses, at least the first 2/3 of it.
For me, the whole, there's two things it's hindering on. One is our interpretation of what the PDO actually says. And then secondly, would we give a variance to this wall where it is today if it was asked for during the permitting stage?
I think that's a good question.
That's
In other
the
words,
question.
looking at the original slope and the original lot, and the request came for a variance to construct this wall in the setback, would we approve it?
And we would all have the opportunity at that point in time to discuss options.
Well, that would not change all of the terms, right? Because that would maybe change the hardship, the result of hardship, but it wouldn't change conditions that are peculiar to the property, right?
Correct.
Well, peculiar to the property is the key word there. Is this parcel different from all the other parcels in the neighborhood? I submit it's not.
Well, I agree. I think that is the question, and I would say peculiar is not just topography, right? Because as has been said, there's a lot of lots sloped way more than this one. What's the difference? The water that comes onto this lot. It's what's upstream from the lot. That's different.
It's one of the last developed ones that's changed over time.
And as was said, there's a reason this lot was developed last, right? Why? I don't know, but could it be that a lot of water drains to this site? If you look at the topography, not on what was submitted, but on the GIS, what looks to be that berm on 13 does not continue onto this property. So it could be the case.
I think there was a desire to have a flat backyard. You could have, if water was coming off the cart path in the tee box, okay, and there's a berm on 13, just like the gentleman said earlier from the construction company, you could build swells and berms to direct water. Now, you're probably going to direct it on someone else's, area, but at least you're going to slow down and decrease the volume that's coming through your backyard. But I think it appears as though when you look at these exhibits D and E, haven't looked at the permit, but there was a desire to have a flat lot. And 13,000 square feet, they had to move 14 feet of soil. You're going to have challenges when you do that.
Matt, can I ask questions in GIS? What's the back width of that lot again?
In the application, it's 85 feet plus 10 feet, so 90, close to 96 feet.
I think if we want to talk about the purity of the lot, then we need to discuss why just 85 foot along this hole is peculiar to the other however long feet to argue the peculiarity. And I think the berm on the adjacent lot could possibly well be created, and you're correct, it probably doesn't go along the whole property, but I think that is an example of what a neighboring property did to stay within the PDO boundaries and maybe achieve a similar result. And in my mind, if we would have asked this at the permitting stage,
I just don't know that it would have shown up at the permitting stage. If it was going to be below 36 inches, would it still need to be approved?
I think that's a discussion separate than, I guess, my point. I do believe in that. I think that's something I've got to make a decision for myself as well as the board. But I do believe that if the argument was made of a sloping front entry driveway and the need for whatever hardship reason, for a side entry that then would have pushed the house, and then the need for, you see my logic?
Mm-hmm.
Then the increasing need for the retaining wall.
Sure.
We were never given that fair conversation to, at that point in time, to provide strict application of our ordinances.
Well, that's why I think it
That's
is
the
different
tough part.
today.
In reality, is the tough part.
Yeah.
And it really isn't. So would we give a variance to this wall if we were given that opportunity to discuss it at that point in time? That's the tough part.
Well, because unnecessary hardship today is different than when there's no house there.
No house, it has not been
So
cleared.
the question is, if we today say remove the retaining wall, and now there's a house there that was built based on the fact that, I mean, he said he tried for months to not put the retaining wall in, and if we're taking that as truthful, and he watched while they had runoff, and you see that we've got extra pictures where there's runoff, then it seems that where the house is now, it's functioning based on having that wall in place, which, again, if this was a year ago, it would be different, granted, but for where we are today, to me, that's where the,
Would not have removed that much soil and gotten it off that lot if you weren't planning on putting retention.
Right.
well,
Or-
right, but we're
or-
talking about a separate point. So you're talking about the hardship did or did not result from actions taken. So I think I'm speaking to the point of a necessary hardship would result from strict application. So if we strictly apply and say you can't have a retaining wall over 36 inches, then today, is that a necessary hardship? So on that point alone, we could get to, did the
that
digging
is-
out cause it, but that's a different question.
But that assumes also that there's no other way to control the water without a retaining wall. And yet, I believe, as one person who testified said, there is other ways to control the water, through berms, plantings, vegetation and so forth. I mean, there's ways to control water, especially previous to the serious excavation they did, because it was reasonably gently sloping compared to the way it is now. And they removed a lot of trees. They removed a lot of vegetation. They removed at least 8 or so significant pines and hardwoods out of that section. I mean, that's what it shows on the documentation. So I think to a great extent, the hardship was self-imposed because they wanted to have a level backyard. They started excavating it. And as a result of the excavation and the clear cutting, they had a water problem. And they probably expected to build a retaining wall in the first place. I mean, it just looks that way to me.
Jack, I think it's arguable as well that by doing that much excavation created a place for all that water to go.
Well, you can't cut all the way up to the cart path almost as deep as they cut without some expectation that you're going to have some problem.
Darren, I don't know if you can answer this or not. If this request is denied and after, next week, they bring in a ton of dirt and the wall is 20 inches tall at its highest point, what's the result?
The result would be, it would still be above the 18 inches that we regulate.
So Darren, based on that, I feel like we need a reapplication. Or a revision. I mean, we can't review it on 913F if now we are saying it's 913B.
Matt, help me with this.
Well, hold 1 second. The staff report does actually refer to the 30-foot golf course setback. So if you look under the request and background, it does talk about I don't see the code reference, but it says the request would vary the 30-foot minimum golf course setback from the property line. That is both found it's in table 9.2A, and it's also 9.13.B1.
Okay.
So it's referring to that. I'd have to read through the staff report again to see if we're actually referring to we do refer to the code section 9.13F, but the other two also come into play.
So if that's the case, then the only way to make this quote conforming is to backfill against the wall so that it's no greater than 18 inches at any location. Is that right?
It still would be non-conforming because it's outside or it's within the 30 feet setback rate on a golf course.
But if it's
Less
less
than
than
18
18 inches.
But as I said, we've had two historical staff interpretations. If it's under 18 inches, we've not regulated. That's where you'll see some of those fences around the golf course that are about less than 18 inches high. We don't regulate those. So we apply the same standard. We would apply the same standard to retaining walls under 18 inches.
Well, if an 18-inch drop is significantly less than 30 inches or 36 inches, and if a golf cart should, in fact, inadvertently veer off that path, and it's not very far off the path, and go over the wall, it's less likely there would be serious injury at 18 inches than there is at 36 inches.
The other thing.
I mean, it's sort of rationalization, I guess, but
The other thing that based on our conversation, I'm not saying that we can't look at how we've historically interpreted things and potentially make code changes based off that or, things like that. So I think the discussion that we're having tonight, we need to take a hard look at how we've been potentially been interpreting it. But that is the way staff has been interpreting it for a number of years.
in other words, we could approve this variance on a condition that backfill be supplied such that at no point is the wall higher than 18 inches from the ground.
That would fall under the staff interpretation, so yeah.
I would add the finished side too. I would say 18 inches of finished side, as you would be looking from neighbors or golf course.
Either side, yep.
That'd be applicable at this point in time that a house has been placed upon the same grading, but that's not up to us, I know yet. Okay.
It's interesting that the downstream at number 9 is not here to share. I mean, obviously, the upstream 13 property owners shared and their concerns, but if that retaining wall goes away,
If they put a berm up, it's going to direct water back onto 13.
right?
I think also, guys, I think the point is, fortunately and unfortunately, we have to act in strict accordance with our PDO. That's kind of our job. And
That's where I think we need a new application, like Matt said. I think if we're interpreting that section, the golf course setback applied to retaining walls is what's before us.
based upon the technicality of the staff's report, which is evidence, not always factual.
Well, I mean, Jared's point is valid. The 18 inches is not, it's not something in this section. It's not specific, it's just a practice. But that is valid, it's just not in what we have. So that, I mean, I'm not saying it can't, it's not worth consideration. I don't know if that means it needs to be revised, the
Yeah. Well, that's right.
report, or if it's something we can just take into consideration in our motion.
Well, I would argue, I think that's it. I think we take consideration of it in our motion. My thought process, and you know me, I could be wrong, is that, based upon the staff application and this whole F comment, I'm not sure that we would necessarily need a total reapplication due to this type of technicality. I think it's on us to go ahead and understand the PDO as a whole and how it applies to this, request. And if we decide that, or if we interpret the PDO, whereas it does not apply into this specific situation, then it's one argument. Or if we determine that it does apply for this retaining wall in this instance, then we have another one, in my mind. Does that make sense? And that's why I really appreciate your input and what your thought process is on whether or not that applies, because it's important to me at this point.
Can I just jump in 1 second? So the notice of public hearing. So the notice of public hearing, we have it all, it's all in the notice of public hearing. So if you look at the notice of public hearing, pull that up, Alfred. Pull the notice of public hearing. The purpose of the The purpose of the public hearing is to receive testimony for a variance request from section 9.13 fences, walls, retaining walls, and 9.28 tables of dimensional requirements for the property addressed at 11 Shinnecock Lane. Both those two hit on what we're talking about. The 9.2A is the setback, so that's the minimum 30-foot setback. And then 9.13 is, again, the discussion on the fences, walls, and columns.
9.13F and 9.2A.
Which is the dimensional requirement for accessory structures.
I'd also state to us as a board that we're not, at this hearing, we're not necessarily reviewing staff's decision. We're interpreting a PTO and how it applies to this case.
Which is why if we're in 9.13F and they're asking for a variance from 9.13F, if it was allowed to be leveled, then we're not here. If it were allowed to be graded to 35.99 inches, then we're not here.
That's your interpretation of it
Yeah,
at this
it's
point in time? Okay.
request from section 9.13F. And if it were a variance request from section 9.13B1 and section 9.13F, I think it would be a different discussion.
So if we gave them a variance specifically to 9.13F and not the overall ordinance, then we do run into an argument of then it would apply in a secondary point. it still would apply.
Well, what does a variance
Argument that it
mean? If they're going to grade it to be less than 36 inches, what does a variance mean? Doesn't mean anything. I think the issue is, as Darren pointed out, is in general, structures of this type within the golf course setback are not permitted over 18 inches.
So, yeah, the question is, how do we use that in our assessment as a Board of Adjustments? Even if that's a staff consideration in review of permit applications in light of where we are today and where the house is today, how do we use that? I mean, I don't know,
I
that's
think
my question.
what I was trying to say earlier is, I think we do use that, and I think we do have consideration to that, but I don't think we disqualify the application due to the verbiage
Fair
that it
enough.
says
Sure.
today. That's my only point, is I don't think we need a reapplication due to what's said in it, or even what was said by the applicant. I don't think that is necessarily prudent. But I do think that we take into consideration in our own definition of what the PDO states and how it applies.
Because I mean, I can evaluate it in 913F to me pretty clearly, but if we're going to look at 913B, that's a different animal.
We can consider 9.13B.
What's your thoughts on that, Matt? Should we consider 9.13B or no?
It is two different considerations.
Two different considerations.
Well, because B doesn't give you the room for anything in the setback, not even 18 inches. So we could defer to staff or, put that in our recommendation if we were evaluating via B. But in terms of F and the four findings of fact, those things I'm looking at in light of what it says about retaining walls.
So if we provided a variance, maybe we need to be more specific in our decision. If that was a variance that we decided to apply.
What would what would the variance be for?
Correct. I mean, that's where I was going, but I'm just trying to play, I'm trying to be fair to both sides here at this point in time on whether or not they need it. In my own head, I'm trying to get to the point. And so our response and our decision can be a little more inclusive.
Well, and if we're talking about conditions, okay, so right now, the wall sits about 41 inches above the top of sod, based on my measurement today.
Measured it today?
I did.
Okay, 41 inches.
So to me, to say, or a condition would be that it needs to be filled 5 inches, like, it doesn't really accomplish anything. Because if the concern is safety from golf carts rolling off and that sort of thing. So I don't know that trying to just get it under 36 even is a worthwhile condition, for what it's worth.
About getting it to 18 inches?
Greater fill.
Be a greater fill. They may not have, still would have alleviated the water problem. There would be not quite a level backyard, as level, let me put it that way. It wouldn't be that dramatic, but it would
What's the
be.
distance from the rear of the house to the wall? I mean, can you make that grade up of,
On here.
what is that, 40 inches? No, not 40 inches.
34 feet from the porch,
Okay,
the
can
closest
you make
corner
that
around
grade
the
up
porch.
without causing another problem, putting water up back under the crawl space? I mean, that would, and I looked at the crawl space fence on one of those pictures. I mean, you're going to put dirt right up to that crawl space vent almost, if you want a usable yard that makes sense.
Well, let me ask this question kind of on that point. You'd create a hill so steep right there just to technically get to your 18 inches that there's no telling what it would look like. And question for staff then, would a flower bed of sorts that then would raise the height in front of the wall qualify if something was built to 18 inches? I don't want to give the idea, but.
A structured, structured flower bed?
That then would raise the height in front, where would the definition apply to the overall height then of where we are?
That sounds like it's similar to putting the fence on top of a burn. There's a issue on that.
Correct. So I guess where I was really going, and
Usually
where would the applicant be if we asked them to raise the height? And there would have to be some creativity involved then to raise the height, I think is fair. And some of that creativity really could get outside of maybe what would be intended.
I mean, similar to what was done, what was explained for the lot 9, you know, there's a berm there. If they would have done that alongside the, you know, on their property, obviously, alongside the cart path, they probably would have prevented a lot of the volume and speed of the water that's coming. Probably, if it's all running off the golf course, you probably would have eliminated all of this. You would have pushed the problem to someone else's yard. You wouldn't have had a flat yard, you know, as appears to be the desire, and you wouldn't need a wall.
So here's what I think. I mean, I've got some points on these findings of fact, but especially after this discussion, I mean, I don't know with the house where it sits. I mean, I can speak to the peculiarity and the hardship did not result, but my thought is we ask the builder to put some, I'm going to ask the resort what they would suggest, but some significant, well, something between that grass that's existing and the wall that could possibly be a stop for a golf cart. You know, a row of something that could grow there and not
I think the
be an
golf cart
issue.
will stop. I mean, that top course of brick, those top cap bricks, you know, are enough to probably stop a golf course. But what about if someone, I mean, that's the tee box. You're probably not going to hit a ball there. But what about if someone goes to get a ball, throws his club, I don't know, you know, and
Never happened.
yeah, not with you, Jack, but, you know, walks over the wall. Now he's 31 or 41 inches of fall.
Yeah.
One of the
Young
things,
man, it probably won't matter, but
Ideally, you'd put a fence on there, but we know we can't do that.
one of the things that we have to answer as a
Makes sense.
board is about the hardship. And as the applicant has stated on their application, the excessive amounts of water drained from the cart path on the golf course onto the owner's property. This creates potential for issues with the foundation and mode growth in the crawl space. And I think that once we reviewed the facts and the pictures at this point in time, I don't think there was ever an opportunity for that to really ever be assessed without it potentially being something of their own cause.
without a doubt, if you look at Exhibit B, okay, look at Exhibit B, there is no erosion on that lot.
No. Right.
Okay, so the erosion problem was caused when they graded it excessively.
Yeah, to blame everything on the golf course, I think is a little, I don't believe that's realistic. I mean, a lot of water moves across the golf course, but it does a pretty good job of absorbing its own water at the same time. And
I can only use Exhibit B here. I mean, there's no gullies, there's no erosion.
right,
You know, it's
that's
a nice
very
pine
telling,
forest.
very telling.
I'm coming back to what we've been asked, and it's a variance request from section 9.13F. So that's what this was denied under, was 9.13F.
No, I mean, the notice actually does discuss it too. It says table 9.2A.
Well, and 9.13F is the main one there.
And we should have cited 9.13B1.
But yeah, A gives, I mean, the
Because
table,
that still comes, regardless, that comes into play into this discussion, because
Right.
that is what we would, that is the historical, that is the section that we've historically used to deny any structures within that golf course setback. It's not cited.
Well,
Yeah, David's asked the right question. I mean, what was told to the applicant? You need a variance for what? You need a variance for building a wall larger than 36 inches, or do you need a variance to build a wall at all within the setback?
Honestly, Jack, I can't tell you because I was not in the conversations
understand.
with the applicant.
We're asking ourselves that.
We
are
can
asking-
find that
that's what I was
out.
gonna say.
We can certainly, we can certainly find that out. I can talk to staff. We can also research if there's, I don't know if there's emails in that regard. I'm not sure. I don't know.
I have no evidence, but I suspect that the variance request was because they were told to build a structure within the golf course setback, particularly over 18 inches, you need a variance.
I would surmise that.
This is going to be hard to do, but let's just say the wall wasn't built. And they were coming in for a variance right now. And they provided, graphics drawings on what this wall would look like. Would you approve that variance? I mean, what hardship has, what have they explained? I don't think one of us would approve that variance.
And I do, back to your point, Jack, I do believe that it is within our board's ability, rights, and purview to, unless we need more information from staff that we would need to ask for and they would need to provide later, I do think it's within our area to go ahead and assume that the PDO defined how we see it today. And I think we're going to end up differing on that a little
Right,
bit.
right.
And that's okay. I think that that's something that we would need to take into our decision, as well as, I think today's point, it's prudent. I think we got to take a look at that.
Yeah, I think my concern is we deny the variance. So it's denied. They have a retaining wall that is 38 inches. If they go back and make repairs of the property to bring the highest point of that wall to 30 inches, inspectors come back out and now they request a variance from 9.13B1.
Why would it be 30 inches when we're talking within the setback, it's supposed to be 18?
Because it's a retaining wall.
It doesn't say that the retaining wall can be 30 inches, though.
It does say the retaining wall can be up to 36 inches if it's a retaining wall. That's what 9.13F says, and that's what they're asking for the variance from. So if we deny the variance and they go back and make this retaining wall less than 36 inches at its highest point, they don't need a variance from 9.13F. At that point, if the village were to come in and say, you have an encroaching structure under 9.13B1, that's where the variance request would be.
We could
But
put that
tonight,
verbiage.
it's 9.13F.
Well, but tonight it also could be, if we decided to provide a variance, we could verbalize it to where it would provide the variance to include that as well, just to clear it all up. And now, that's a total different logical thought than maybe where I am, but again, that is something we can do. We can get at, and I would actually urge us as a board member to be as specific in this case as we can. I think it's correct.
Does one of the people who provided testimony wish to provide additional testimony?
Yeah, please.
Ms. McAuliffe, would you mind speaking into the microphone if you're going to?
The public hearing is still open. You can provide additional. Okay.
There's too much going on right now, which I appreciate that.
Would you please take a seat, ma'am? Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry. What she was trying to get across was an email between herself and staff. And again, she was trying to be helpful. I have to get into the email and look at all the
That's fine.
context.
Yeah.
I mean, your other option is if you need additional information, we can continue this.
We need to continue this, right, to a later date. I mean, for the most part, cases that come before the Board of Adjustments are variance requests prior to the build. In other words, I want to do this, will you allow it? This is a little unusual in that it's built, and we're on the horns of a dilemma as to what to do with the built. It's like, I made the mistake and I'm asking for forgiveness. That's a tricky situation, obviously.
That's right, because it is different. If we say take the wall out, we don't know what the impact is to that house. We understand there was erosion during construction. Erosion happens when you have, ground that's been disturbed. Now that things are stabilized, erosion is not the question, it's water. It's always been water. So, yeah, how far do we go? What hardship is it going to create, or how far are we reasonably comfortable with that?
But we can't reward people in the future for breaking an ordinance,
Well, but
asking for the variance based upon.
and
it
aren't
would
we
be
not supposed
worse
to
if
take
now
into
if you made me do it
consideration
now.
precedent? But don't we not take into consideration precedent? We're supposed to just look at
We
this.
look at what's in front of us, and 9.13F is what's in front of us. And if the wall is under 36 inches, under 9.13F, they don't need a variance.
We would still order it out. Because if it's over 18 inches, again, based on our staff interpretation, we would still order it out or lower it to 18 inches. Had they come in with a request at 18 inches, we would have granted the request, based on, again, our historical interpretation.
And then it comes down to challenging the decision.
Another variance challenging the
Made by
decision of
staff.
the staff. And that could always happen.
So if we grant the variance, do we need to take into consideration the 18 inches? Like if we grant the variance to 913F, what else, is there anything else we need to do there? Because obviously that doesn't speak to the 18. You see my question? Like, is there another problem created if we,
If you grant it at 18 inches,
no, well,
I mean, you wouldn't even have to, you could just deny it, and then they'd have to lower it to 18 inches or increase the grade to 18, so it's no more than 18 inches.
I think
Or-
they lower it to 30 inches like they intend to do. And then when 9.13B1 is brought in, they challenge whether that's the proper ordinance to be used, since retaining walls are defined separately.
Well, granting a variance, in my opinion, implies that we are approving what is built today, which, as you say, is 40 inches in some cases. Granting the variance approves a wall that's, a retaining wall over 36, 40 some inches, right? Denying the variance completely, does that say you must either remove the wall or make it consistent with what the village normally expects, which is no more than 18 inches?
That is what our order would be.
There's another choice, which is granting it with conditions. And those conditions could be fill it to it's no more than 20 inches or 18 inches or 30 inches or whatever, and, landscape accordingly and so forth. And those are the other conditions we could put on
You
that.
run some risk I think you run some risk when you do that. I mean, to show my cards, I'm leaning to not grant the variance, let them come back with a new plan. Someone knew that 36 inches was a magic number, but it's at 40. I certainly would have thrown some dirt in there and, beefed up my sod a little bit so I could come in here and tell you it was 29 or 27. So I think they just really need to relook this. Probably get a survey out there, make sure that they're not moving water in areas that don't need to be moved. Work with the, number 6 to see if some type of,
You can work something out, yeah.
yeah.
So a flat-out denial.
Needs a
is-
little bit more than a 10, an hour or two here to discuss about alternatives.
So a denial with no conditions says you got to do something dramatic with that wall.
I'm building a home. I put in a retaining wall. I don't know what staff's historic interpretation of the ordinance has been. I'm looking at the ordinance on its face. I'm building a retaining wall. I'm within the accessory structure setback, and I'm under 36 inches. Why are you applying a separate section of the PDO when I have a retaining wall, not a fence, wall, or similar structure?
But the variance asks for, essentially asks, in my opinion, it asks for approval of what's built today.
Yeah, I mean, I guess a possible condition, approval condition could be that the wall be modified to not be, to be at 18 inches max above grade. Don't, I mean, we,
Build to it, modify.
well, I guess we give
short-
it the option, right? If
Cut it
18
down.
inches is where it would be if we send it, I guess if we're going to predict it's going to come back around to 18 inches.
Do we know that's the right answer, though? What does 18, if you bring that down to 18 inches, what's the grade? Does it, the enjoyment out of the individual's home, is it pumping water with 3 sump pumps in there now? Not that that's what, we're here to do, but I don't want to make a decision when we don't know. Someone needs to go there, survey it, an engineer, and look at, okay, here's the volume of water. Here's the speed of the water that's coming. Here's the what it's going to cause. That's why I'm inclined.
I don't think we get there. I think our PDO defines walls, and it defines retaining walls.
And right now, it's
This is a
non-conforming.
retaining wall,
Yeah, it's non-conforming retaining wall.
Non-conforming, as is.
as is.
So it's
And if
simple
we deny the
decision.
variance and they fill to 30 inches, as is planned,
Again, and go back to, if there was not a wall there in a home, is there hardship? Answer would be no.
So if we deny, then the village is going to expect them to have an 18-inch at max, however they do it.
I think
And-
they're
and
going to
that
expect
may-
them to
But-
come back with
but
a
then
new
they- Then
plan.
they challenge, this is a retaining wall,
They
this
come
is
back
not a
for
wall,
variance.
and we're under 36 inches.
That would be a staff interpretation and variance, correct?
So we'll have a second variance request if we deny it, and the only way they can satisfy it is to bring it to 18 inches.
That would be, that's staff's currently that is staff,
Okay.
the staff interpretation.
I don't know what additional information we could ask for, to ask for a continuance, to be honest with you. We're almost beating a dead horse here. I mean, we ought to
I would
figure out
agree with you.
who wants to do what.
I'll make a motion, and just hear me out on these. So I do, starting with A, I move that the Board of Adjustment approve or deny the variance request for 11 Shinnecock Lane and adopt the following findings of fact. Unnecessary hardship would result from the strict application of the ordinance, because without this retaining wall, the water would drain into the crawl space. Based on the experiences presented by the builder, there was drainage on the property. This wall has cured those issues. B, the hardship results from conditions that are peculiar to the property, although similar, there are other houses on this side of the hole, and they experience similar topography. It's the last one that's been built, so the water flow encountered by this home specifically, with all the building and addition of impervious surfaces upstream, so to speak, this house is unique in that sense. C, the hardship did result from actions taken by the applicant or property owner. I do think with the clearing here, that's where this variance request fails, is I do feel that the hardship was caused by specifically the way that the lot was graded, cleared out. If they had moved less, then it may not be as severe. And, because that one failed, I'll get to D. I'll say the variance request is consistent with the spirit, purpose, and intent of the ordinance, such that public safety is secured and substantial justice is achieved, because they're trying to protect their home, protect the value of the property. They're trying to make it as minimally invasive and visible to the golf course as possible, because all you're going to see from the golf course side is the top of the wall. So, when you're looking at 9.13F, that appears to be the intention of that specific portion, is that they don't want retaining walls encroaching into these as an accessory structure into the setback, in a way that would, be visually offensive. So, based on that, that's why I would make a motion to deny the variance request.
I would second the motion to deny the variance request.
So one point of discussion. Because I disagree with partial of that. If the motion carries and it's denied as stated, is that it?
They bring it into compliance with 9.13F.
Well, my question is if the motion does not carry and approved, does that allow a further motion from our board, or is that the only? It does not. That's it. And then if it doesn't carry as well, then it's not automatically approved, right?
Denial does not carry.
I think
Further discussion.
are we done?
We're discussing.
Do we
the
need any
motion.
further evidence, or are you guys comfortable with closing the evidentiary hearing, the public portion?
Yeah, I'm
I
comfortable.
think we're going to have a motion, but yeah, I'm okay with that.
Well, first, I'll make a motion to exit the public hearing.
Second.
Second.
All in favor, sorry,
Aye.
motion to close was made by, was it me? And then seconded, I believe, by Matt.
Right.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Because I think if I were to make a motion, if it came, that's where I'm going. So, yeah.
Because I actually agree with the denial. Okay. I disagree with some of the points.
Wait a minute, hold on, point of order here. Is there an active motion on the,
There's not an active motion.
Okay.
Oh,
There's not an active
okay. I
motion.
thought there was, because Jack seconded that.
And that's my mistake.
Okay.
I was walking through each point, and
Got it.
if
Gotcha.
it came across
Okay.
as making one, that's how I'm thinking through each portion of this. And
There's not a motion.
there's not a motion, but thinking through each point, unnecessary hardship would result. I think I can get there. Hardship,
okay, you want to make the motion?
I was talking, I'm happy to, if.
I can make a motion. It's a lot different than that, but.
How different?
Apparently significantly different. I will make a motion. I move the Board of Adjustment deny the variance request for 11 Shinnecossett Lane and adopt the following findings of fact. Unnecessary hardship would not result from the strict application of the ordinance. There are other alternatives to control the water flow other than a retaining wall. The hardship does result or resulted from conditions that does not result from conditions that are peculiar to the property. There are multiple properties along the lane of similar topography and similar water flow that have been controlled in a different fashion rather than a retaining wall. The hardship did result from actions taken by the applicant, that is, clear cutting and grading the land such that water flow became a problem. the requested variance is not consistent, or is consistent, is not consistent with the, is not consistent with the spirit, purpose, and intent of the ordinance such that public safety is secured and substantial justice is achieved. No conditions.
Why, can you, what are the reasons for D?
Or D, did you say? I said it's not consistent, in that the spirit of the ordinance is to, for the public safety and the neighborhood consistent with the neighborhood and the spirit of the neighborhood and its desire for, and the resort's desire for development that's appropriate to, next to a golf course.
Okay, we have a motion by Jack Farrell. Do we have a, well, I guess I'll repeat the motion.
You don't have to repeat
You
it.
don't have to repeat it. I'll second the motion as stated by Jack.
Okay, so motion made by Jack, seconded by Jeremy. We'll vote one by one here, starting with Paul.
Concur.
Yes.
Yes.
No.
Yeah, I'm also going to vote because I just don't know the effect of denying, but disagreeing with the findings of fact. The way that it was stated, I agree with those findings of fact. Therefore, I would deny as well. So the results are 4 against, oh, 4 for the motion, sorry, 1 against. So this variance is denied.
How about a break? I move to take a slight recess for 5 minutes.
Do I have a second?
Second, if you don't need a second. Yeah, second.
We'll take a short recess. All right, guys, we're going to resume. It's right about 7:05, I hope. Yep, right on the dot. We have I guess you can say retaining walls are the issue so nice we get to do it twice. The next public hearing for the application for a variance at 25 Aronimink Lane. Sorry, we'll have Alfred, I guess, do the staff presentation again, but since we're in our regular meeting still, I'd like to make a motion to enter the public hearing.
Second.
Motion made by myself, seconded by Jack. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing no opposed, or none opposed. Alfred?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do.
Thank you. Proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The purpose of the public hearing is to,
Because we did it before getting into the previous hearing, I do see Mr. Mark Stewart in the audience, who is the applicant's builder. At the same, I guess, disclosure before, I've known Mark for several years. I was very good friends with his son. I stand nothing to gain, no matter which way this goes. I've not made up my mind on this decision either way. Whether he would hold it against me or not, even if I've hurt his feelings, I don't think he would take it personally, so I have no issues making what I feel is the right decision. So if anybody has an issue with me continuing, feel free to speak up. Does anyone else have any conflict that they would like to disclose? Any ex parte communications, anything whatsoever?
No, other than having visited the site yesterday.
As I mentioned, visiting the site today and talking with the property owner, but nothing that would prohibit me from making a fair and just decision.
I know Mark as well, if we want to state that, but there's no conflict of any sort in that arena.
Alfred, sorry for interrupting. Feel free to continue.
you're fine. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The purpose of the public hearing is to receive testimony for a variance request from section 9.13, fences, walls, and columns, F, retaining walls, tables of dimensional requirements for the property, address as 25 in Romerke Lane, further identified by Moore County parcel ID number as 000-24619. This property is located within the R10 High Density Residential Zoning District. Specifically, the applicant and owner, Teresa Johns, is requesting the variance to allow for a retaining wall in the golf course setback. The public hearing was noticed in accordance with the Pinehurst Development Ordinance and the North Carolina General Standards 160D-406. This is the public hearing notification area map. All the properties highlighted in red received notification regarding the variance request. And if you see above the subject property, that's part of the golf course. This request is before the Board of Adjustment because the applicant requests varies section 9.3F of the Pinehurst Development Ordinance, which does not allow retaining walls over 36 inches to encroach into the rear and side setbacks for accessory structures. The property is located within the R10 High Density Residential Zoning District, and the rear yard abuts Pinehurst Course Number 6, which is Zone Recreational Development District. The accessory structure setbacks from the golf course in the R10 zoning district is 30 feet and 10 feet from the side and rear on non-golf course setbacks. The subject lot 235 was created as a part of Phase 2, Unit 17 subdivision in May of 1979 by Pinehurst Incorporated. The property is approximately 11,690 square feet in total area, which is more than the minimum 10,000 square foot lot size of the R10 zoning district. Property was purchased by the current owner in December of 2020, and based on the records from the Moore County Tax Department and Register of Deeds. The surrounding lots which were also created as part of the original subdivision Board of Golf Course property and include single-family homes, all built from the 1990s to present. In September of this year, planning and inspection staff issued a permit for a new single-family home on the vacant lot for the applicant, Stewart Construction. The approved site plan was included in the agenda packet material and is labeled Exhibit S-4. A retaining wall was not part of the approved application for development, but was discovered after staff received the final as-built survey, Exhibit S-5, and determined it was not in compliance with the applicable setback regulations. The finished wall height varies, and the applicant has provided a letter from an engineer that the wall is constructed in accordance with the North Carolina Building Code. Prior to construction, the vacant lot had approximately 19 feet of elevation change, increasing the height from the front left of the lot to the right rear golf course. After grading for development of the site, there was still approximately 4 feet of elevation difference at the rear of the lot. The applicant has indicated that the construction of the wall was to alleviate drainage and runoff issues on the lot due to the topography. And this is pretty much the area view of the subject property with 2-foot contour lines. And this is the original subdivision plat from 1979. As you see, number 235 is the subject property. The picture to the left is the approved site plan that was submitted for approval. And as you look at the as-built survey, it shows the retaining wall to the rear of the property. It kind of shows like curvage of the retaining wall. And these are photos of the retaining wall currently from a front side to kind of like a side view. The standards of review: the Board of Adjustment shall not grant a variance unless or until it makes the following findings. Number one, unnecessary hardship will result from the strict application of the ordinance. Number two, the hardship results from conditions that are particular to the property, such as location, size, and topography. Number three, the hardship did not result from actions taken by the applicant or the property owner. Number four, the requested variance is consistent with the spirit, purpose, and intent of the ordinance. Action by the Board of Adjustments. After conducting the public hearing, the Zoning Board of Adjustments may have the authority to subpoena witnesses and may request additional information, continue the public hearing on the requested variance, and grant the requested variance, grant the requested variance with conditions. In granting any variance, the Board of Adjustments may attach appropriate conditions, provided that the conditions are reasonably related to the request. Deny the requested variance. Any decision to grant or deny the request shall be accompanied by findings of facts stating the reasons why the request meets or does not meet each of the standards of review. Granting any variance request requires a concurring vote of 4 to 5. At this time, staff would like to submit the following to record: staff reports with attachments and exhibits, presentation, application and applicant's material and exhibits. This concludes the staff presentation portion.
Your mic's not on.
Does anyone have any issue with admitting the staff report?
No.
Perfect. So admitted. Does anyone have any questions for staff at this time?
I do not.
I guess I do, again, and it's probably going to be the same issue as last time. So I guess the agenda, the notice that was sent references section 9.13F, and the variance is requested from 9.1E how do those work together? Or I guess the better question is, how do those, is there any issue there? Because before we were, the notice and everything requested a variance from 9.13F, and the application also requested a variance from 9.13F. But here, the variance doesn't appear to go with what is noticed.
Can you repeat that, sir?
The application for the variance is requesting a variance from a different ordinance section than what was referenced in the notice.
Correct.
Do we need an amended variance request, an amended application?
I'm not quite sure, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, so the notice mentions, is it 9.13F, but the application does say 9.1E.
That's correct.
I think we would need a
Yeah,
amended application.
unless it was intended to be 913F, which was noticed, but if it's a different section that wasn't noticed, then we would have to notice it with this section. I think if staff can.
You're correct.
Is this the same as last time, verbiage? Exact, or is it different?
On the notice?
Yeah.
It's the same. I can't locate mine right now.
What you're looking for?
The notice is, that's not the
I can-
notice that was given. That's just the background.
I don't have a notice.
I'm pulling it up.
I think I might have already thrown mine on the ground.
In the.
It does look pretty similar.
Yes.
Obviously, the address is different, but the rest of the language looks similar.
9.13F.
Correct.
The applicant's application notes the ordinance section that they are asking for a variance from is 9.1E in this case.
So I think we need a amended application.
Yeah, the staff report indicates 9.13F. So it looks like it's just what's on the application that,
It's kind of my same, and I know it's confusing for us all, but it's kind of my same point as before.
Before.
It is
the
different.
Before
Yeah, I
the
agree.
application was requesting for the variance from what was noticed.
Okay.
Here, the application isn't what was noticed. So
Yeah, okay.
I don't know if, I think we need an amended application if we're going to discuss, given, to make sure that notice was proper. Yep,
Different this time a little bit.
yep.
I still believe that our application is for 9.1E, and we can make a decision. We have the width that we can make a decision that's appropriate.
But if people were concerned about 9.13F, and that's not what we're granting a variance for, then they weren't properly
Because of the
noticed.
note, you're stating because due to improper notice that we should.
Well, yeah,
But-
if the application's requesting a variance from 9.1E, then notice should have said,
Same point as earlier, but this one states a little different.
Does
right?
it verbalize it, besides the number, does it verbalize it?
it references the ordinance text verbatim.
well, yeah, the text is copied from 9.1E in the variance application.
So I guess my question would be procedure. Just pause.
Yeah, I think we, need an amended application.
What actually determines what we're making a recommendation on? Is it the application, or is it the staff report, or what?
Application.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my point earlier. We can still make a recommendation based upon the application. My question really is the notice being improper, is that something, is it? I mean, improper, and then is that something that we should be having a conversation on? I'd like everybody's thought process on that. It's something I weighed on heavily last time.
That's a good question, but going back, hold on one second.
Sure.
The application variance, Exhibit A, 1, 2. The section is 9.1E, which is incorrect, I guess, if you would think about that. But the text, where does that text come from?
9.1E.
Yeah, it's 1 and 2, I think, in that section.
Oh, buried in there, okay, yeah. No. Show me.
Right. You're on 13,
Well, the
so
application's
it's
like
9.1,
Oh,
not
9.1,
9.13.
oh, 9.1, that's a whole different part of the.
That's where I'm
never
going.
mind.
That was my whole point earlier.
Okay,
This one.
But if it's heavier this time, then it's obviously different. And so it's obviously a point
got
of
it.
discussion.
Yep.
It's important.
Yeah, I think
however, it does say in 9.1E, allowable encroaches into required yards, a building structure or lot shall not be developed, used, or occupied unless it meets the minimum yard requirements, blah, blah, blah. And the principal buildings or structures on a lot, including decks, landings, terraces, porches, and patios on grade, shall not be located in whole or in part in the required setback. Now, it doesn't say wall, but it does say including decks, landings, terraces, porches, and patios.
they didn't include fences or retaining walls.
Well, but it says including, they didn't include every single possible thing in the world that you could possibly build.
Can't read it in, though. If it's not included, then it's excluded.
I would state that my feeling is that we would need to decide on the application. And it seems a little different in this case than the last case.
It is.
On that.
Trouble with modifying it on the fly here is that you have public notice, as you know.
Yeah, and we can't, I think the notice doesn't match up with what we're deciding.
Right.
So I don't think we can move forward with this application at this time.
We're not rejecting it, we're just
Yep.
saying it's defective, from what we think it's defective and needs clarification.
Yes.
Chairman, I think you got to point us in our direction here. I mean, would it be proper for us to continue the hearing from this point? No? It would just be to reject it outright?
Yeah, I mean,
Reject the,
What would the hearing be on?
the application, the hearing, in my thought process, the hearing's on the application.
But
But I get
if we're
your-
saying that the application is, we believe the application is flawed and needs clarification, it's pointless to have a discussion about it.
Staff,
No, I
can
get
you
that
give us some
point.
guidance?
Hold on one second.
so the application's asking for a variance from 9.1E, but that's not what was referenced in the notice.
Correct. The notice is referring back to that 9.13F.
13F.
So we can't grant a variance for something that hasn't been properly noticed.
So we need a new application.
I don't know if we need a new application. We can have, the application can be adjusted. We have to send out a new notice.
Got it. Yep, I agree.
Yep.
Because the application that they sent in was what was supposed to be for what's the appropriate interpretation from a staff perspective, what the code is. So that's the issue, that's part of the issue.
Because the application is filled out with staff help. I mean, they're correct. I mean, like, a citizen doesn't just pick 9.1E. They're given guidance.
I believe they sit down with the staff member to discuss some of these issues.
So, yeah, we just need to know which one we need to review, and at this point, it's not clear.
Yeah. No, we're not. Or wait,
So how do we get out of the public hearing without making a decision? I thought we did.
yeah, no, we took the
We went into public hearing. yeah.
staff report. So,
Recess.
Well, I move that we continue this to a further date to be defined, probably What is the next reasonable date?
Pending a new,
Let's just let's take a 10-minute recess quick so I can look at.
We'll take a 10-minute recess to discuss this matter later in a second.
Yep.
Does that make sense? I
10
propose a 10-minute recess.
second? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
We're going to have a recess. We will resume at 7:35.
Consider that a dry run.
We've received staff's presentation, and it has been entered into evidence, but for the time, we're going to close the public hearing for now, or I'd like to make a motion to close the public hearing, because can we resume to accept more, we can close it for now, just not accept any evidence, then reopen it to receive more evidence when
Understand.
we're prepared, correct?
I mean, I believe.
That,
Jack, you,
that's the way I understand
we can
it.
close it and come back into it, right?
So I'd like to make a motion to close the public hearing because we're not going to receive any more evidence at this time.
Second that.
Any opposed? Okay, so
All in favor?
there was a second, motion made, seconded by Jeremy. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so we're out of the public hearing. If we consider this application on its face, we're considering a variance that wasn't noticed. So before we can consider the application, we need to continue this hearing, but we need a amended application so that we can consider what was noticed, so that that notice is proper. So in order for us to consider the variance request needs to match what was noticed to the public before we can move forward and consider this. So we need to set a date.
Can we set that date outside of the public hearing? Just a procedure question.
It's, it needs to be noticed, so.
Okay.
Well, no, the notice is the same, but we need to know what date we're coming back. How long would it take to get an amended, I guess, when is the space available? When, are there other things going on in here? Yeah.
Well, yeah, because we all five need to be here. So we are meeting the 12th. If we want to encroach in on that.
Monday?
Time,
Or we look at the January scheduled meeting.
12th is if we're all going to be here on the 12th, considering that a lot of times the staff presentation for that's what, an hour and a half to 2 hours. It's a work session.
Yeah, the advantage of the 12th, we've already replied as to availability. I don't know if we've all replied
I'm
positively on
available.
that,
I'm available.
on the 12th.
I am.
Not. Yep.
Okay.
Wednesday, December 14th. Actually, I have a conflict there as well.
I do as well.
What, can we look to the January regularly scheduled meeting? I mean, I just know we're coming on the holidays, which is
Yeah.
generally the hardest time to schedule things in the year.
Thursday, January 5th.
I'm available.
Is there any reason, I guess, from the applicant's side to accelerate it beyond that? Because I don't want to delay if there's a reason to.
Oh, yep. Oh, everyone into the microphones. So January 5th, our regularly scheduled meeting.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll continue it to that date. Can I?
As long as we're not holding up a certificate of occupancy or anything like that.
Yeah, I think that's what she was saying. We do want to have consideration, so if there's anything to be considered, we just want you to speak into the microphone. Please. It's tricky.
Hold it down.
Press it, release.
I can arrange my work schedule, and I'll make January 5th work. I will redo an application, but just, I guess, for the record or off the record, I was never sent a notice that my retaining wall was a problem. Kelly Brown sent an email to Mark Stewart's secretary, Nita, that said, this retaining wall encroaches into the golf course setback. There was no reference to any 9-point anything of what it violated. I met with Kelly, and I forget the gentleman's name, that talked about how you address the different sections in filling out the variance application. So when I did, I got online myself and did Village of Pinehurst setback encroachments is what I searched for. And that's where it gave me section 9.1. And I read that and I thought, well, it doesn't really talk about this specifically, but that's where it talks about setback encroachments. That's why I picked 9.1. And also in the instructions, it said you can't put any more text than what fits in the box. So I had to cut and paste what I could in the box, which is why that text doesn't match. So I just, I'm saying the village, if there's a violation, should send some type of letter to the homeowner, not somebody send an email to the builder, whoever secretary wants, because my CO, I'd already got the certificate of occupancy, and we were already moving in before I heard about the retaining wall being an issue. So I feel like the village did not notify me properly, and it should state you're in violation of this exact whatever, so that I could then cite that correctly in my application for variance.
Yes, ma'am. And all we can do is try to cure what has happened at this point. And because 9.13F and 9.2A are the sections that were noticed, in order for notice to be proper, that's the issue that we would need to discuss. So we'll accept an amended application for the January 5th Board of Adjustment meeting. If there's business for planning and zoning, then we'll follow the planning and zoning meeting. But the earliest we would start is 4:30 p.m. on January 5th. At that point, that'll be our meeting. So.
All right. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry for the inconvenience.
So yeah, we'll continue to January 5th, and that's when we'll discuss this variance request.
Understood.
Good. I'm not ending the meeting because it's continued, but motion to continue to January 5th to our regularly scheduled meeting. Do I have one?
I'll make the motion to continue this meeting till January 5th at a time to be determined later after the Planning and Zoning Board meeting.
Or regularly scheduled board.
Regular
meeting.
scheduled
Yeah.
board meeting.
Yeah.
That's right.
Second.
Motion made by Jeremy, seconded by Jack. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Nope. I will see you guys on January 5th.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.